Maggie, get that disgusting mess off the floor before my CEO arrives. Nora's voice, sharp as shattered glass, echoed through the house. Coffee dripped from my trembling hands, staining the pristine white marble a muddy brown. 47 years of marriage, countless memories, now just a blemish on cold stone. At 68, I was reduced to an unpaid servant, a ghost in the life I thought I'd built. If you're intrigued, leave a comment and let me know where you are reading from. It will mean the world to me to share my story. Let me rewind to the beginning, to how I ended up scrubbing floors on my daughter-in-law's birthday instead of basking in the warmth of family. 2 years ago, when my Robert died unexpectedly, I clung to my son, David, believing he would be my anchor. I couldn't have been more wrong. "Mom, you can't manage that big house alone," David had said, his brow furrowed in what I now recognize as calculated concern. "Nora and I have plenty of space. It'll be perfect." He avoided my gaze, a subtle shift that should have set off alarm bells. Perfect. That word now feels like a cruel joke. The sale of my house happened with unsettling speed, a whirlwind I couldn't navigate amidst the fog of grief. David took care of everything, shielding me from the details while I wrestled with funeral arrangements and mountains of paperwork. "Don't worry about a thing, Mom. We'll handle it." But handle it translated to control, a lesson learned too late. The first month felt like an extended visit, a carefully orchestrated performance. Nora smiled sweetly whenever David was present, inquired about my day, even recreated my signature pot roast once. But when David was away on business, which was becoming increasingly frequent, the mask would slip. "Maggie, could you help with the dishes?" quickly morphed into, "Maggie, this kitchen is a pigsty. Clean it up." Small favors became blatant demands. Polite suggestions hardened into unwavering orders. David wasn't blind to the shift. I often caught him observing, a flicker of unease in his eyes when Nora would reprimand me for improperly loading the dishwasher or incorrectly folding towels. He'd simply clear his throat and disappear, choosing neutrality over confrontation. The guest room became my gilded cage, my cherished china cabinet, lovingly crafted by Robert for our 20th anniversary, mysteriously couldn't fit into their meticulously curated home. My photos with Robert, the visual embodiment of our life together, vanished from common areas, deemed aesthetically displeasing. I desperately clung to the belief that it was a temporary adjustment. Grief can warp behavior, I reasoned. David was preoccupied with his demanding promotion at the bank. Nora was swamped with the pressures of her burgeoning marketing company. I was simply a convenient outlet for their mounting frustrations. But this morning, on Nora's 42nd birthday, the facade crumbled. She didn't want a mother-in-law. She craved domestic help, a servant she didn't have to compensate. "I've invited my biggest client for dinner," she announced while I was preparing breakfast, her tone devoid of any warmth. "James Mitchell from Mitchell & Associates. This contract could make my career, so everything has to be immaculate." I nodded, foolishly anticipating inclusion in the birthday festivities. "You'll serve dinner promptly at 7, then disappear. This is strictly business, not family time." That's when the coffee cup slipped, not because of my aging joints, but because of the casual disregard in her voice, the way she spoke to me as if I were hired help, rather than the woman who nurtured and raised her husband. "Look what you've done!" Nora shrieked, her perfectly styled blonde hair flailing around her face. "Do you have any idea how much this marble cost?" I knelt, frantically dabbing at the spreading stain with paper towels, while she loomed over me, scrutinizing my efforts. This was my reality now, 68 years old, groveling on my hands and knees, being belittled by someone young enough to be my daughter. "I want this place spotless before James arrives," she continued, her voice escalating. "And wear something presentable for once. First impressions are paramount in business. Something presentable." As if my Sunday church dress wasn't sufficient for her precious client. But as I knelt there, something within me shifted. Perhaps it was the way the morning light accentuated the coffee stain, highlighting it like a spilled truth upon her flawless floor. Or perhaps it was the echo of Robert's voice. "Maggie, never let anyone diminish your worth." I was on the precipice of discovering that some stains are indelible and some revelations irrevocably change everything. The afternoon became a frantic blur of scrubbing, polishing, and prepping for Nora's pivotal dinner. Every surface had to gleam, every pillow perfectly positioned. I moved through the house like a forgotten memory, noticed only when summoned for the next demeaning task. "Did you iron the linen napkins?" Nora barked from the dining room, where she was arranging imported flowers that cost more than my monthly prescriptions. "Yes, and the table is set with the fine china," I replied, fighting to keep the weariness from my voice. "Our china now, Maggie. Everything in this house belongs to David and me. Don't forget it." Her stinging reminder was the truth. Legally, I possessed nothing. When I'd sold my house, naively intending to help with their down payment, David had promised I'd always have a home with them. I foolishly trusted in spoken words rather than demanding legal protection. David appeared in the doorway, surveying the dining room. "Looks fantastic, Mom." His voice carried that forced cheerfulness I'd grown to resent. "You've really gone above and beyond." "Your mother has been toiling all day," Nora said, failing to conceal her irritation. "I hope she has enough energy left to serve properly tonight." David's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Perhaps I should help with—" "Absolutely not," Nora interrupted him. "You have that crucial conference call with Tokyo at 6. Business always comes first." She sent me a pointed look. "Some of us understand priorities." I watched my son grapple with an internal conflict, likely a cocktail of guilt and the first inkling of awareness about my diminished state in his home. But then his phone buzzed, and the moment evaporated. "I need to prepare for that call," he mumbled, avoiding my gaze. "Of course, darling. Your mother can manage everything." Nora's voice dripped with insincere sweetness. "She's remarkably capable when she applies herself." By 5, I was physically and emotionally drained. My lower back screamed in protest from the hours of cleaning, and my hands were raw from scrubbing grout with a toothbrush because Nora deemed the bathroom insufficiently sanitized. "Go change into something suitable," she ordered, her eyes glued to her phone where she was frantically texting. "And remember, you're serving dinner, not participating in it. I don't want any awkward chatter about your medications or your husband's outdated war stories." Her casual dismissal of Robert's memory struck me like a blow. My husband, the man who'd tirelessly worked 2 jobs to finance David's college education, had served with honor in Vietnam. His stories weren't rambling recollections, they were pieces of history, poignant lessons about courage and selflessness. In my meager room, I changed into my navy blue dress, the one I'd proudly worn to David and Nora's wedding 7 years earlier. It still fit, a stark contrast to the unrecognizable state of my life. I caught my reflection in the mirror and barely recognized myself. When had I become so gaunt? When had my shoulders begun to curve inward, as if I were trying to become invisible? When had the light vanished from my eyes? 2 years of relentless grief followed by 18 months of systematic belittlement had transformed me from Robert's confident partner into this broken woman staring back at me. "Maggie!" Nora's voice echoed up the staircase. "Get down here immediately. He'll be arriving any minute, and I need you to take his coat and escort him to the living room. And for heaven's sake, smile. You look like you're attending a funeral." I realized with a chilling certainty that I was indeed attending a funeral. The funeral of my dignity, my self-respect, and my rightful place in my own son's life. The doorbell chimed precisely at 7. Nora smoothed her scarlet cocktail dress one final time and shot me a warning glare. "Remember what I said. Professional service, then vanish." I opened the heavy oak door, my practiced smile firmly in place, prepared to greet yet another of Nora's important clients who would likely dismiss me entirely. But when I saw the man standing on our doorstep, my smile froze. Silver hair, still thick despite his 62 years, piercing brown eyes that had haunted my memories for decades, the same strong jawline now distinguished by time rather than youthful arrogance. James Mitchell, the man who shattered my world 39 years ago. He looked at me, and I watched recognition dawn in his eyes like a devastating slow-motion accident. "Oh my God," he whispered, his expensive briefcase slipping from his suddenly nerveless fingers. "Aren't you the woman who—" Time ceased. 39 years dissolved into nothing as James Mitchell and I stood frozen on the threshold. His face paled, then flushed crimson. Emotions I couldn't decipher flickered across his features like disjointed clips from an old movie. "Good evening, Mr. Mitchell." Nora's voice sliced through the frozen moment as she appeared beside me, radiating practiced charm. "Welcome to our home. I see you've met my mother-in-law." James's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. His eyes remained locked on my face, searching for something. Confirmation, denial, a means of escape. "Yes," he managed, his voice trembling. We've met." I dredged up my voice from the wreckage of my composure. "Please come in, Mr. Mitchell. Mrs. Harrison is looking forward to discussing business with you." The formal words felt like shards of glass in my throat, but I stepped aside to allow him to enter. He moved past me cautiously, as if I were a volatile element that might explode if he got too close. "Wonderful," Nora beamed, oblivious to the undercurrent of palpable tension crackling between her esteemed guest and her unassuming maid. "Maggie, take Mr. Mitchell's coat. James, can I offer you a drink? I have that excellent scotch you mentioned." James shrugged off his expensive overcoat without acknowledging me. But when I reached for it, our fingers brushed. He recoiled as if I'd burned him. "Scotch would be perfect," he said, finally wrenching his gaze from me to focus on Nora. I hung his coat in the front closet, my hands shaking so violently I nearly dropped it twice. In the mirror by the door, I caught a fleeting glimpse of his reflection. He was watching me, his expression unreadable. 39 years ago, James Mitchell had been a junior associate at a prestigious law firm, married to the senior partner's influential daughter. I'd been a 29-year-old paralegal, desperately struggling to support my 6-year-old son after my husband Robert's construction accident had left him temporarily unable to work. James had been charming, sophisticated, everything my simple life wasn't. When he offered to assist with David's escalating medical bills, I'd been eternally grateful. When he offered more than financial assistance, I'd been devastatingly foolish. The affair lasted 4 months, long enough for me to fall in love, long enough for me to believe his hollow promises about leaving his wife, long enough for me to commit the biggest mistake of my life. When his wife discovered the affair, James had sacrificed me without hesitation. He claimed I'd seduced him, that I'd threatened to fabricate a sexual harassment claim unless he provided financial support. His father-in-law, predictably, believed him. The firm terminated my employment without severance. Even worse, they ensured I was effectively blacklisted from any legal position in the city. Robert never discovered the real reason I'd abruptly switched careers from law to nursing. He'd accepted my fabricated story about wanting to help people heal, never knowing I was the one who desperately needed healing. "Maggie!" Nora's piercing voice snapped me back to reality. "Stop loitering and serve the appetizers." I carried the tray of expensive canapes into the living room where Nora and James sat on opposite ends of the pristine white leather sofa. She was in full sales mode, gesturing animatedly as she outlined her marketing strategies. "The demographics are ideally suited for your target market," she was saying. "Young professionals with disposable income who value authenticity and experience." Authenticity. The irony wasn't lost on me as I served the man who had once destroyed my very sense of self. James accepted a canapé without making eye contact, but I observed his hand trembling almost imperceptibly. Good. He deserved to be nervous. He should be. "Your mother-in-law," he said carefully. "Has she been living with you long?" "About 18 months, Nora replied dismissively. "She needed a place to stay after she lost her house. A simple family obligation, you know how it is." Lost her house. Such a deceptively simple phrase to describe the devastating financial crisis that had followed Robert's death. Unmanageable medical bills, exorbitant funeral expenses, and a poorly understood reverse mortgage had consumed everything we'd painstakingly built together. "Family obligation," James repeated slowly, his eyes finding mine once again. Yes, I do know how complicated family relationships can be. The intensity of his stare made my skin crawl. What was he thinking? Was he replaying that horrific day in his father-in-law's office when he'd stood silently by while I was falsely accused of extortion? Or was he calculating how my presence here might jeopardize his carefully constructed life? "Dinner will be ready in 15 minutes, I announced, placing the tray on the coffee table. "Perfect timing," Nora smiled. "Maggie's an excellent cook. She's been such a tremendous help around the house." "Help?" As if I were a charity case rather than a member of the family. I retreated to the kitchen, but their voices carried clearly through the serving hatch. "She seems familiar," James was saying. "Have we met before?" "I highly doubt it," Nora laughed. "Maggie's always led a very simple life. This is likely the most sophisticated evening she's ever experienced." Simple life. If only she knew how intricate my life had once been, or how exponentially more complicated it was about to become. The prime rib roast sat on the counter, perfectly cooked and resting under foil, while I attempted to calm my racing nerves enough to carve it properly. Through the serving hatch, I could hear Nora's animated monologue about market penetration and brand positioning. But my attention kept drifting back to James's voice. He sounded different now, more self-assured, more refined than the insecure young lawyer who'd whispered insincere promises in my ear 39 years ago. Success had bestowed upon him a sense of gravitas, but I wondered if it had also given him a conscience. "Maggie, we're ready for dinner," Nora called. I arranged the sliced beef on the platter with roasted vegetables and Yorkshire pudding, my hands moving mechanically while my mind spun. What did James want? Why hadn't he acknowledged our past? Was he protecting his carefully crafted reputation, or was he plotting something even more sinister? In the dining room, I served them with the unobtrusive efficiency that Nora demanded. James watched my every movement, his fork hovering over his plate as if he'd forgotten how to eat. "This looks incredible," he said, but he was looking at me, not the food. "Maggie's full of surprises," Nora replied, delicately slicing her beef. "You'd never guess she used to work in law offices before she became a nurse." James's fork clattered against his plate. "Law offices? Oh, really?" "Years ago, before she had to change careers. Weren't you a paralegal or something, Maggie?" "Yes," I said quietly. "I was a paralegal." "Which firm?" James's voice was carefully controlled, but I detected the underlying tension. This was perilous territory. If I mentioned Hartwell, Kingston, and Associates, he'd know I remembered everything. If I lied, he'd know I was deliberately concealing something. "It was a long time ago," I said diplomatically. "I found nursing more personally fulfilling." "How admirable," James murmured. "Helping people heal instead of participating in legal battles." The words felt like a deliberate sting. He was subtly reminding me of what he'd taken from me. Not just my job, but my faith in the legal system, my trust in people, my belief that hard work and integrity mattered. "Yes, well, some battles aren't worth fighting," I replied, meeting his gaze directly for the first time since he'd arrived. A flicker of understanding flashed in his eyes. He knew that I knew. More importantly, he knew I'd deliberately chosen not to expose him. "Maggie, we're perfectly capable of serving ourselves," Nora said irritably. "You can clear the appetizer plates and begin washing the dishes." I gathered the plates with practiced efficiency, but as I reached across James for his bread plate, he gently touched my wrist. "Excuse me," he said to Nora. "Might I use your restroom?" "Of course, upstairs, second door on the right." As I turned toward the kitchen, James followed close behind. In the hallway, out of Nora's earshot, he grasped my arm. "We need to talk," he whispered urgently. "No, we don't," I said, pulling away from his grip. "That conversation happened 39 years ago, remember? You made your position abundantly clear." "Please, you don't understand. There's more to it than that. Things you don't know." I laughed bitterly. What could I possibly not know? You were married. I was expendable. Your career was more important than my life. It's pretty simple math. "My wife was pregnant," he said quietly. 3 months pregnant when she found out about us. The words struck me like a physical blow. In all these years, through all my festering anger and hurt, I'd never known that crucial detail. She threatened to leave and take the baby. Her father would have destroyed me completely. But more than that, she threatened to hurt herself if I admitted that the affair was mutual. So you made me the scapegoat. I was 31 years old and terrified. His voice cracked. I made a terrible mistake. Yes, you did, and I paid the ultimate price. From the dining room, Nora called out, "James, is everything all right?" "Perfectly fine," he called back, never breaking eye contact with me. "Margaret, please, can we talk after tonight? Away from here." "My name is Maggie now," I said coldly. "Margaret ceased to exist 39 years ago in your father-in-law's office. And no, we cannot talk. You're here for business with my daughter-in-law. Conduct your business and leave." "But I need to explain." "The bathroom is upstairs," I said, raising my voice so Nora could clearly hear. "Second door on the right." I turned away, leaving him standing in the hallway with his long overdue guilt and his hollow excuses. But my hands were trembling so violently that I had to grip the kitchen counter to remain upright. After all these years, James Mitchell was back in my life, and somehow I knew that this was just the beginning. The remainder of the dinner unfolded in a hazy fog of forced normalcy. I served the lemon tart dessert, refilled wine glasses, and cleared plates while Nora celebrated what she believed was a landmark business deal with the man who had once attempted to ruin me. James signed a preliminary agreement with remarkably steady hands, but I noticed he barely touched his food. "This definitely calls for champagne," Nora announced when the paperwork was finalized. "Maggie, bring us the Dom Perignon from the wine refrigerator." As I poured the expensive champagne, James raised his glass. "To promising new partnerships," he said, his eyes meeting mine over the rim. "And to second chances." Second chances. The ambiguous phrase reverberated in my mind as I cleaned the kitchen after they'd retired to the study to finalize the remaining details. David appeared in the kitchen doorway, loosening his tie. "How did dinner go? Is everything okay?" I studied my son's face, observing the subtle signs of strain around his eyes, the way he kept glancing nervously toward the study where Nora's gleeful laughter carried down the hall. "Fine," I said carefully. "Your wife seems pleased with her new client." "Good, she's been stressed about landing bigger contracts." He hesitated, then added, "Mom, about earlier, when Nora was giving you those instructions about tonight." My heart leaped hopefully. Finally, he was going to acknowledge what had become glaringly obvious to everyone except him. "I know she can be particular about how things are done," he finished lamely. Particular. Such a mild word to describe blatant cruelty. "Your wife has very high standards," I said diplomatically. "Yes, she does," he said, shifting uncomfortably. "But maybe we could work out a better arrangement, for household responsibilities, make things more equitable, more fair." After 18 months of being treated like hired help, he was finally noticing. But his proposed solution was a more efficient chore system rather than addressing the underlying issue of respect. "That would be very welcome," I said, though we both knew nothing would actually change. David could eloquently express his discomfort when his conscience pricked at him, but when push came to shove, he always chose the path of least resistance. "Maggie!" Nora's voice pierced through the hall from the study. "Mr. Mitchell is leaving. Please show him out." I dried my hands on the dish towel and walked to the front hall where James stood, putting on his overcoat. Nora had already headed upstairs, giddy with champagne and what she mistakenly believed was a resounding success. "Thank you for a truly lovely evening," James said formally as I opened the front door. "You're welcome," I replied, equally formal. He stepped onto the porch, then turned back to face me. "Margaret, Maggie, I meant what I said about needing to talk, and I also meant what I said about there being nothing to discuss. Please." His voice dropped to an urgent whisper. "There are things you desperately need to know about what truly happened, about what I did afterward. After you systematically destroyed my career and my reputation, what could you possibly have done afterward that would even remotely matter?" I tried to help quietly without you ever knowing, when David needed surgery for his leg condition. Stop right there. My voice was sharp enough to shatter glass. Don't you dare try to take credit for my son's recovery. I'm not seeking credit. I'm simply saying, you're saying absolutely nothing because you did absolutely nothing. My husband and I took care of David's medical needs entirely on our own. Thank you very much. But even as I uttered the words, a seed of doubt began to sprout. That remarkably generous anonymous donation that had covered David's experimental surgery when he was 8 years old. We had never discovered the identity of the donor. The surprisingly quick insurance settlement that had arrived just when Robert's company was on the brink of collapse. Small business contracts that had materialized seemingly from nowhere just when Robert needed them most. Good night, Mr. Mitchell, I said firmly, closing the door. Through the sidelight, I watched him drive away in his gleaming silver Mercedes. When the taillights vanished around the corner, I leaned against the door, my mind racing. I leaned against the door, my heart pounding like a war drum. Hanging in the hall closet, half hidden behind James's coat, was a small embossed envelope marked JM inside. A photocopy of my old termination letter scrawled with, "I'm sorry," a carbon stub from the anonymous donation for David's surgery, and a tiny brass key labeled Box 314. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Don't trust Nora. There is no CEO dinner. It's a setup. Upstairs, the crash of breaking glass echoed. Outside, headlights swept across the windows. 2 black SUVs rolled to a stop at the gate. The doorbell rang, again and again and again. So, there you have it. A life seemingly settled, unexpectedly shaken by the reappearance of a ghost from the past. It's a story about regret, deception, and the enduring strength it takes to finally face a past that refuses to stay buried. But more than that, it's about reclaiming your worth, even when you've been made to feel invisible. And believe me, Maggie's journey is far from over. Part 2 dives headfirst into those broken champagne glasses, those mysterious SUVs, and the chilling truth behind that CEO dinner. You won't believe what happens next. Now, I'd absolutely love to hear what you thought of Maggie's story so far. What are your initial reactions to James's reappearance? What do you think is going to happen? Leave a comment below, ask a question, or just share your thoughts. I'm genuinely interested in hearing your perspective. And if you want to find out what secrets those headlights are bringing, be sure to hit that subscribe button. That way, you'll be notified the second part 2 goes live, and you won't miss a single twist or turn. Thanks so much for reading, and I can't wait to see you back here for the next chapter.